Audio Jungle.
Longer just about survival.
Audio Jungle.
And this is like quite rare. Not just in terms of
Audio Jungle.
the time period that we're living in, but even right now. There are so many people in the world where it is about survival. So we have the great blessing of being in a place where, losing a job seems to be a real horrible problem, which I'm not downplaying that it is. But at the same time, there are lots of people where that's like a luxury to even, spend time worrying about losing a job. So that's not our situation. Our situation, in some ways you could say, it's the most conducive to going beyond simply surviving and to go into quality of life. And I would argue that mindfulness practices,
Audio Jungle.
it's about a quality of life. It's about enhancing quality of life.
Audio Jungle.
We have our five senses.
Audio Jungle.
We would like to see, and have the kind of eyesight that's 20/20, right? We want all our senses to be sharp, right? We would rather, not have to wear glasses, unless, it makes you look
Audio Jungle.
more interesting. Then you might do that. Otherwise, you're like, can I go get, LASIK done, where sight is so perfect. Smell, taste, touch, all of that. So then we work really hard because in order to get all those things, they don't just come like that. You work very hard. So you work very hard. Well, originally, why were we working so hard? We're working so hard so that you can get all these goodies, right? But most of us don't remember when we crossed that line, where the Dalai Lama says, people work so hard until they fall sick. And why do they work so hard? So that they can pay for their medical bills when they fall sick. So now, right? It's not even something very intelligent. I mean, forget about spiritual. Like I said, we're not going to talk about spiritual here. Just forget about spiritual in that sense of like, religious spiritual in that sense. This is just simply like being intelligent about how we live our lives. Do we want our food to taste as good as they can taste? Yes. Do we want the sights to be as clear and as inspiring as we can be? Sure. So all the five senses, we all agree that we want them to be perfect, as nice as possible. But I think what has happened is that we spend so much time trying to improve the objects of the five senses rather than the five senses. Right? We think that, if only I can get a reservation at Admiral, oh my God, the food would be fantastic. For those of you who are local, you know what I'm talking about. I still can't get a reservation. Anyone has an in? Let me know afterwards. Well, sure, to some level, yes, perhaps. There's something that is really tasty there. But if your sense of taste is distracted, then it doesn't matter. It's not going to improve. But if your sense of taste is really acute, this is obviously kind of an Asian saying here. a bowl of rice can be really satisfying. Can be really satisfying with no soy sauce. Just a bowl of white rice. And that's the beginning of what we call mindfulness. Normally what we think is, oh, people say, oh, I can't do mindfulness, I can't sit. Well, don't sit then. I mean, that's the most obvious place to start for a lot of people, mindfulness meditation. It's about, sitting a particular way, breathing a particular way. Yeah, you can learn all of that, and we teach that, and we would encourage that for people who want to learn that. But more fundamental than that is simply what we might call paying attention. And to pay attention as a habit to cultivate paying attention, we have to start somewhere. So instead of giving you a technique and say, okay, now sit like that and breathe like that, which we can do. I mean, all those are legitimate. But I think with the short time that we have, I think what I would suggest to you is think of it as paying attention and cultivating a habit of paying attention. Now, what do I mean by paying attention? Paying attention means, first of all, being present. Here and not there. Being present. And then when we are present, the next step is that inner gossip, that inner chit-chat that goes on, just kind of let that go away. So you start by paying attention to something very limited in the scope. If you like nature, if you like being out in nature, for example, I would suggest going home today, and find a spot that you can walk out to from your house close enough. Find a spot and limit that spot to actually 1 square foot. And as a practice, each day, go out there and sit right next to it and pay attention to that 1 square foot that you have designated. That's your spot. I mean, we don't have to be so precise. If you write like a circle, then it's a circle. Just narrow it to 1 spot and just pay attention. Do that 5-10 minutes. Maybe 3 times a day. You want to find a place and a subject that is interesting to you. There are other times where, in the terms of training the mind, you want to force yourself to do certain things. But for this, don't find something that you're not naturally attracted to. So you need to have some sort of interest for that, and then go there every day and pay attention. When you're paying attention, just observe all the activities that is going on in that particular spot. When you find that your mind starts making up stories, just come back. There is a different occasion for following that story, developing the story. If you're a writer, you write a story about it. If you're a painter, you translate that onto canvas. That's some other time. This particular exercise is simply being with that spot, just paying attention, just observing. Not quite participating either, but just observing. If that's not your thing, right? If that's not your thing, then maybe it's a painting. Maybe it's a particular painting that you're just gonna pay attention and being present with it 10 minutes a day. Or you might want to use something else, a different sense, not just sight, but taste or sensation. So treat yourself to 5 raisins a day, or 5, dried cranberries,
Audio
5 prunes. Each day, that can be your practice. Pick one up. Give yourself time.
Audio Jungle.
First, touch it. Try to kind of let all the other senses kind of fall on the wayside. Just touch.
Audio Jungle.
Yeah. Then sight, smell.
Audio Jungle.
Not much sound. Then taste. And then when you put it in,
Audio Jungle.
let the taste kind of see what's going on with your tongue. Different parts of your tongue, how it's reacting. No judgment. Don't feed it either. Don't let the story start. But simply being present to all of this. When you start doing that, what's happening is you're beginning to develop those muscles, so to say, whereby when you actually, sign up to take a course on meditation, mindfulness meditation, it all kind of comes very easily. A lot of us, I think, have a hard time maintaining or starting a meditation practice because we have all sorts of fantasies that we project onto it. And then we derail ourselves. At its simplest, what we're doing is paying attention. Yeah. So when we start paying attention, our energy is not being dissipated all over the place. We're present. Then when we do that, we're living our lives. We're not letting our life, whatever that is, whatever that narrative is, take over. We're actually living our lives. When you drink, when you eat, when you walk, when you sleep, you're right there. In Buddhist texts, they say that human lifespan would grow shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And so some people said, well, I don't think that's the case. If anything, people are living longer and longer and longer and longer. And so part of the economic problems is because people are living too long. All these quote-unquote entitlement programs can't support or whatever, right? But actually, if you think about it, I don't think the Buddhist texts are talking about absolute length of how long we live. Because in some ways, our lifespan, we're living shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. Yes. 500 years ago, yeah, people live up to 60. Right? The absolute figure, 60. Now it's 90, let's say. So in that sense, you can say life has become longer and longer and longer. But if you really think about it, even in Asheville, a constant refrain, myself included. Hey,
Audio Jungle.
what have you been up to? Oh, busy. How are things? Pretty good, but kind of busy.
Audio Jungle.
Yeah, it's always busy. It used to take
Audio Jungle.
2 hours to prepare a meal. Now it only takes 20. Why am I so busy?
Audio Jungle.
It used to take a couple of days to get from here to Marshall. Now it takes, what, half an hour? Why am I so busy? It used to take, right, a minute, or maybe no, half a minute for the page to load. Some of us remember that. Now, more than 3 seconds, it's too long. So where did time go? It's because our attention span has become shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. So I think Buddhist texts are right. Our lifespan is becoming shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And so we and that's because it's lack of mindfulness. Not present. Not at all present. So if we can cultivate the ability to pay attention, the ability to be present. Now, realistically,
Audio Jungle.
at some point, something got to give. Something got to give. I was participating in a panel at the college. It's actually a pretty kind of arrogant title. They had something like, it's like the human resources people, they have to organize these things so that our insurance rate is lower, like these health and health enhancement stuff. So they got a panel of people that and they say the title was pretty long, but it was something like, they look like they have it all figured out. What is their secret? So it was a panel of like usual suspects, right? Like some minister, some yoga instructor, and some blah blah blah, and some and then some college professor. And so and what was interesting for me at that panel is that everyone talked about, how they can be more efficient, which I can appreciate that, right? But most of that whole conversation, there were like maybe 10 or 11 of us. Clearly these people, are doing well, but they all talked about, as far as I could tell, more about how to be more efficient, how to balance things better, and all of that. So I didn't say much because I felt kind of like the outsider. And I didn't know what to say. Until towards the end, somebody specifically asked me and said, well, you have not really said much. What would you say, So it's like, yeesh, what am I going to say? So I thought about it and I said, well, I'm going to say what I really think about this. I said, I'm sure we could be more efficient. I'm sure we could be more, organized. I'm sure we could be, balance things better. But I think we simply have too much that we're trying to put on our plate. Something gotta give. Because if the desire is not checked, and all we're doing is creating more space, then immediately, whatever space you create, you fill it up. And there will be no end to that. All the gadgets that have been created were created so that we can spend less time doing whatever it is the gadget is supposed to do, so that we can have more time to do what? Get more gadgets. Fill it up, 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 fill it up. Right? So even all these things or methods or exercises or even meditation,
Audio Jungle.
if it doesn't address the more underlying attitude of more is better,
Audio Jungle.
then there's no end to this. Both the curse and the amazing thing about human beings is
Audio
we are
Jungle.
very tenacious. We can create more space so that we can do more things. We can find more time so that I can fill it with more stuff. Oh, there's no end. But life becomes shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter.
Audio Jungle.
So a more fundamental thing I think that we need to rethink and adjust is really to start saying, this much is enough. This much is enough. But that can't be forced. We have to learn it from direct experience. So sometimes it's good to go fill it all up. Because otherwise, you're just trying to be pious or whatever it is, or healthy. But you're not really convinced, You think maybe I can still be happy if I can put another onto my plate. I always talk about it's like going to like a buffet, whatever it is, whether it's at the Grove Park Inn or at Asiana. It's always a disappointment. Without fail, it's always a disappointment. Why? Because no self-discipline. Someone who has self-discipline, I think then it doesn't matter. But with no self-discipline, it's just like, ooh, look, I got to try every single thing, right? And you try to do that. And then when you leave, because there's so many things, you are in physical pain. That's one, right? That's mind over matter, I said. Yeah, overeating. At these super buffets is mind over matter, because the body is already yelling and screaming and saying, stop, stop. The mind is not satisfied. It's craving for more experiences. It wants more. So you try. So you torture the body because the mind is not satisfied. So when you leave, right, the mind is still not satisfied because the mind says, but there is that last dessert. If only I could have that, happiness would have been reached. World peace would have been attained. That last thing, right? But there's always that last thing that you can't fit onto your plate. Oh, let me get a bigger plate. Let me get a bigger appetite. Let me get a bigger house. I'll end with, I was talking about building houses. So I'm building a house. It's 1,100 square foot, somewhere thereabouts, 1112. And all my friends and people and myself even, I was like, oh yeah, it's a good sized house, for one person, and you have a dog, and sometimes people come visit, and it's a good size, it's a good size. And I was like, oh yeah, it's a good size. It's kind of small, but it's a good size. When I was looking at the traditional Japanese house floor plan, they had a floor plan for, the square footage was 1140. It says a house for 7 to 8. A house for 7 to 8. Socially, they have a sense of space that is very different from ours. They can be right next up to each other. They are not cramped. They have found their space. If freedom is about clearing up as much space as possible, that's not real freedom. If happiness is about getting rid of all problems, that's not true happiness. It's in the midst of, right, the limitations. We have found our freedom. We have found our space. We have found our longevity. Yeah. How do we do that? We have to begin by, first of all, paying attention. That's the basis of mindfulness. Secondly, you got to start giving up certain things. Because it's pointless. Whatever to give up, that's up to you, you know. But something gotta give. So that's just half an hour of rambling. Kempo and Lama is going to start this practice called Chud. It involves sound and singing and drums and bells and even a trumpet that is made from a person's thigh bone. After the person died, people actually donate their body parts for making ritual items. In fact, when Kempo's mother passed away, her skull was turned into a skull cup for ritual purposes. So again, a very different sense of how people relate to the body. So this tradition actually comes from pre-Tibetan shamanic traditions that is combined with Buddhist overlay. So Kempo Rinpoche will talk about that. So thank you for coming. If you have interest in learning more about things that we kind of touch on the surface, you know where Urban Dharma is. It's across from the Grove Arcade, right next to Captain's Bookshelf. And then, actually, we're going to start something out in Marshall. So if there's anyone from that direction, talk to me, talk to Mark, talk to Garris. Yes, Urban Dharma. This is Urban Dharma. Yeah. It's a new Buddhist community. And then if you're out that way in Marshall, we're going to start something there in January. So thank you for coming. And then I think Kempo is ready outside.